Good morning. Happy Saturday morning, class. I apologize. I'm a little behind on recording the videos and getting back to you guys answering your questions. I'll be honest, it's kind of awkward recording these videos just because I'm just kind of talking into a camera or a computer, basically. If you guys have any ideas on how you would like me to kind of spice up the video rather than me just sitting here and talking to you with this mundane background back here, you guys can just let me know in the comments and such. So there's a few different questions that were posed, and I'm going to answer both from week 3 and week 4 all at the same time. Just make sure that you guys only have to watch one video. Don't want to make it too crazy and too long. So the first question that was posed is kind of asking why I believe what you meant was the American people kept moving and trying to find a place they felt safe and could settle. To be honest, this whole concept of manifest destiny, the British came over, the Europeans came over, they kind of took the land, right? And then once it became America, they wanted to expand and check out more land and have more for their own. And so unfortunately for the Native Americans and the Native people living across the United States and basically everywhere where the Europeans decided to come and take, they were seen as savages, so they weren't gifted the land. They were allowed to have their land taken away because the white man had they had basically first dibs on the land. So, as you can see with our society today, unfortunately in society over time, there is a lot of greed because everyone wants to be the best, everyone wants to have the most. So these people would come in, the Americans would come in and take the land from the natives, whether it was by force or just kind of talking them out of the land. And so that's kind of what the United States is trying to make up for theoretically today with giving natives the reservations and NAGPRA kind of trying to give them back their artifacts that were taken away and such. Basically, all of the Native American laws that are being passed in the last 20, 30 years are kind of trying to make up for the wrongs that we did in the past. And one of the students did comment how it's ethnocentricity. And, that's true. The Europeans and, the Anglo-Saxons, Caucasians still think today that they are the superior ethnic group, and as did in the past, the Europeans necessarily haven't changed their views on that, which is, a bit unfortunate because we don't necessarily learn from our mistakes. We just kind of keep repeating them. The other question that was posed is kind of asking the difference between Indian Territory and reservations. Reservations are actual pieces of land that have been already designated and given to a native group to where they can live on and they can utilize the land for the resources and everything. But there's kind of a double-edged sword with that because the U.S. government unintentionally at the beginning gave away a lot of minerals and such like oil. A lot of the native reservations that were given to the native groups at the beginning were actually rich with oil and such. So the United States government has now kind of created like an idea where the native groups can only benefit to a certain amount off of these resources, which is kind of terrible. And unfortunately, the reservations aren't really a good place. There's, as you read in the book, there's high rates of drug use, alcoholism, poverty. And the United States isn't really doing much to fix that. Indian Territory is territory that's been basically an area of land that has been set aside by the United States government for the relocation of Native Americans. So that's really the main difference. So kind of Indian Territory is what has been set aside, hasn't fully transitioned into a full reservation, basically. And then the other question that was posed has to deal with Spirit Caveman and Kennewick Man. Genes aren't necessarily going to change that quick in terms of the tribe and the area that they were found. You have to remember that a lot of these remains are thousands of years old, and the native groups aren't necessarily staying on the same exact land because a lot of these native groups were constantly moving around. They were migratory, hunter-gatherers and such. They weren't all just staying in one little place like the American people think that they do today on the reservations. So genes can change rapidly in very kind of the perfect environment, but a lot of the times you're not going to have the gene change that quickly. And over the space of thousands of years, it's probably going to be different groups that are settling on the same exact land, and just kind of picking up where the others left off. And the other question, skeletal remains just happen to be someone passing through. Yeah, that's a perfect example. A good example is Otzi over in the like Swiss Italian Alps and such. He was a hunter-gatherer, and a lot of times you just have these people passing through, or they don't end up dying exactly where they were living. Like if you find someone in a cave, a lot of the times if it's possible that they could have like fallen into the cave or something, or they could have just died there, and that was the easiest place for the rest of their group to bury them, basically. And then to switch over to the Arctic area questions, the Arctic culture area. Let's see. This whole concept of two spirits, right? The thing I love about native groups is their fluidity and understanding of how gender isn't a societally set concept, which the westernized civilization really focuses upon, which we're trying to kind of break up nowadays, like this whole stigma, whether it's male, female, or not, right? Sex is one thing, gender is another, right? You can have your biological sex, but that might not be who you identify with in terms of gender in this societal concept. The natives, they had this concept of two spirits, and it was just super cool because a lot of these native groups across the Americas actually had these amazing ideas and understandings of how life was, how you could identify as one thing but be another, and different things like that. So the Unangan aren't necessarily unique to that fact. So I guess to answer your question, is it culture or is it just a human thing? I mean, it's human nature. We are a incredibly intelligent species that can grasp multiple concepts and understand multiple things. Yet society kind of tries to shut us down and keep us within this like realm of what we can and can't do. Yet the natives were very understanding and very evolutionary per se, in that they would just kind of accept things. And especially like shamanism, that was very drastic, how you could think that someone's death was because another group put a spell on them. That's pretty wild, but it's really cool. And so the last question is asking about the binding of joints and why it was done. So the binding of joints, particularly for the Unangan, I apologize. I'm just like most of you guys, I don't have the 100% pronunciation of all of these tribes. And thus I do my best with that. But the joint binding during menarche, it was actually because of the curative powers that these young women were perceived to have. And so men would actually be brought to be treated for different pains, illnesses, and even actually seasickness, which is particular to the Unangan because they were in the Aleutian Islands. And it's basically the reason why the joints were bound were because it was seen as if they weren't bound fully and correctly, then it would bring premature senility and possibly joint disease to the women. And also it would harm the village's food and water supply. So, I mean, they had some very unique views on how certain things happened, right? And so their view of religion is definitely more drastic than the westernized religion, yet it is something that is fascinating, and it could literally take up a whole course, multiple semesters of just one course on just the native religions, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, so I'm not going to keep you guys too long. I went a little long on this one, 11 minutes, but I hope you enjoyed, and I hope it answered your questions. And I look forward to the future questions. Have a wonderful weekend, guys.